I'm Owen Bardini, he/they, the Computer Games Promotion and Marketing Assistant at Manchester Met University. Would you like to introduce yourself with your name and what year you graduated in?
Yeah, I'm Sam Myatt, he, him, and I graduated in 2022.
Would you can you briefly describe to us what your job role is and what led you to pursue this job position?
Yeah, so I'm a graduate Unreal engineer at Tanglewood Games. What led me to pursue it was I took quite an interest in the programming side of game development coming out of uni, and Tanglewood is a company that primarily focuses on things like performance and porting and engineering support for Unreal Engine, and so it was quite a good
What
fit.
specific aspects of your education do you think were most valuable in helping you to get this job in the industry?
I think mainly just experience in the act of actually making games and working on the things. I think one of the things I've said a lot in the past, I think really benefits from going to uni is just an excuse to spend 3 years making games and doing stuff and having people guiding you and giving you feedback on those things. There's no amount of individual learning that can ever add up to the experience of trying and failing and then getting better over time. And so I'd say that I think the thing from uni that was the most valuable was just doing things for 3 years and failing and then getting better and doing them more. And it meant that when eventually getting into my actual role in the industry, a lot of those initial kind of bumps maybe already are smoothed out. Of course, you're gonna hit bumps no matter what, but I think just making games for 3 odd years was probably the most valuable thing.
And so how did you land your first job, and can you walk us through the application and interview process?
Yeah, so I started applying to jobs the end of my final year. A couple of months out, I started applying, just kind of throwing out applications, seeing what would happen, basically saying in them like, I haven't graduated yet, but I'm going to soon. And in the end, I actually, it was a message that got thrown into the Manchester Met game dev Discord in the job opportunities section. John Henry posted a message because Tanglewood was opening a Manchester office, and they reached out to the uni to say, hey, we're looking maybe to potentially take on some graduates. Have you got anyone that might be a good shout? So John Henry put a link in there with an email address to go and email, and so I immediately got an email over with CV, portfolio, kind of just a run through of who I am. And I got an email, I think, like a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks later, inviting me to my first interview. My first interview was with two senior engineers that were here, and that went really well. And then after that, I had a follow-up interview about a week or 2 weeks later with the two co-directors of the company, Chris and Terry, and that interview went really well as well. And then after that, there was like a period of time where it was sort of waiting on opportunities to pop up and arrive. And then I think it was somewhere around July time, maybe like late June, I got an email offering me a graduate position starting in September. And so I was quite fortunate to have a job relatively quickly outside of uni.
Yeah. Any challenging parts with transitioning from being just a regular university student to a working industry professional?
Yeah, there were definitely some large differences. There are some kind of like humps you've got to get over initially. I think the main thing is the act of like a 9 to 5. It's working 5 days a week for the middle of the day and then having the weekend. That was something I had to get used to. While I was in university, I had a part-time job at a supermarket, but that was 3 days a week kind of randomly placed. And then obviously university, we only do lectures during the week, but as anyone who's in uni will tell you, you kind of work whenever is kind of physically possible for you to do so. And so going to that kind of regimented structure of like, you wake up on a Monday, you go to work, you sit in an office, you do your job for a while, and then you go home. And like having that kind of like set structure and place was something that I think initially was slightly difficult to get used to. I think there was very much still an attitude of like, I should just keep working. Like, I might as well just keep working. I'll work over and I'll work into the night and I'll pull all these late nighters. And luckily, the industry has is turning away from that sort of thing. And so there very much was an initial thing of like, oh, if I don't have this done by 6 o'clock, okay, do it tomorrow. Like, go home. Like, I think that was an interesting kind of difficulty. I wish that back in uni I'd maybe spent a bit more time coming up with like clear defined structures of work rather than doing these kind of really late kind of coding sessions or anything like that, just to kind of make that a bit of an easier transition. But I think that was the main thing. It wasn't too bad.
Were there any specific tools or skills you learned during your studies that directly contributed to getting your first job?
I mean, just the work in general. Obviously Tanglewood, we are an Unreal Engine development studio. We primarily work in Unreal. We don't really touch anything else. As a result, we primarily work in C++ as well. I hadn't done insane amounts of C++ or Unreal on my portfolio. The majority of my portfolio is actually Unity and C#. But the key thing that got across in my interview, and the key thing that I really kind of sold when I was applying for this job, was it's not about what I have done or what I know right now. It was the ability to find that out itself. So they knew that I can pick up an engine quickly and I can understand how to learn it, and they know that I've done a little bit of C++ and that I would very quickly get the ideas behind it. And I think that was the key thing for me. I'm very aware that I'm quite fortunate in the sense that I didn't do anything that this company's doing, and then was still able to convince them to work here. So there weren't any specific tools or things that I did during my education that I think instantly translated to this job. But I think it was mostly the fact that the tools I had used, I had learned them and I'd shown easy progression in them, and therefore that translated easier to the stuff we actually will use in the job.
How important was your portfolio in securing a position, and what tips would you give current students about creating a strong one?
It's insanely important. I'd argue, the most important thing that you can show when you're applying for a job. It's showing a brief window into how you're actually going to be during the job. It shows your work. It's what are you doing. I think the main tip I usually give out for portfolios is ease of access. So when you apply for a job, there are lots, especially at graduate level, there are lots of people applying for that job. Lots and lots of people, and it's someone's job to sit there in their office and go through all those applications. And so any slight barrier or inconvenience makes it harder for you to stand out in that crowd. So if you're going for programming roles, make sure that you've got a link to some GitHub with an example of code. Make sure that you are pretty concise in your actual description of what you did on the game. Make sure you say, like, on the right, like, is this a solo project or a team project? Did you do this in uni or was it a personal project? What language is it in? What engine was it in? In your description, don't just talk about the game itself. Mention what challenges you faced engineering-wise. Say, I really had this issue with creating this inventory system and actually the kind of data structures behind it, and this is how I solved it. Focus on the thing you want to sell and make it easy to find that information. If you want to do something in art, make sure you're putting that very far forward. Make sure you're linking to things really easily. Make them accessible. Like an itch link, put your game on itch.io, make it easily downloadable. If you can possibly make it playable in web, you're a lot higher chance that people will play your game if it can be played in a web client than getting them to download a zip file and extract it and then run it. Make it very accessible and make it tailored to the thing you're doing.
For the next question, did you participate in any internships, game jams, or side projects during your studies? And did these experiences impact your job search?
Game jams. I did a couple of game jams. I lived, when I was in uni, we lived in a house, me and a couple of people from the course. We all lived together, and we did a couple of game jams together, and that was always great. I think the impact that had on my job search was primarily that it just gave me more stuff in my portfolio. A lot of places really want to see that you do stuff outside of university projects. But ultimately, they want to know that you're passionate and that you really care about game development and you really want to be involved. And so if you have personal projects on there, they oftentimes can speak a little bit more than university projects because they're not something you had to do, they're something you haven't really wanted to do. And so they definitely helped my job search in the sense of, they gave me example things I could put on my portfolio. The other thing I participated in with the 10 people who I lived with, as well as some others, was we had a team that went on to do transfuser near the end of university as well, and that definitely helped my job search. I actually got asked in my interview what transfuser was. The person interviewing me didn't know what transfuser was, but after kind of explaining transfuser, it was something that pretty immediately stood out to them as like, oh, that's quite good. Like, you've had to go off and gain not only real game development experience, but game dev studio experience. Transfuser is very weighted towards the business of game development as well, which I think gives graduates a more kind of holistic view of the job as a whole, and that can very much help when kind of starting out.
So looking back, is there anything that you wish you had done differently during your studies as a student that might have made your job search easier?
It probably wouldn't have made my job search easier, but it might have made my job easier if I'd done a bit more Unreal. That would have been quite helpful if I did more Unreal Engine during university. I think the main thing is I wish I'd been a bit better at time management, make sure that I'm not doing those really late nights, make sure I'm setting like, this is your time to work, and this is when you don't work, and that is a very healthy kind of attitude. That would have made the transition a bit easier. I think the other thing that I maybe wish I'd done slightly differently is maybe step out of my shell a little bit more in terms of personal projects. In university, we were primarily doing Unity and C#, and then when I was doing personal projects, they were also primarily done in Unity and C#. And I think I really could have benefited from reaching out, starting things, even using, not even just Unreal, things like Godot. Try and find something really weird, do some stuff in Pico 8, use some Lua script, like, just expand out a bit, try other things, broaden your skill set. I think it's okay when you're starting out to have a wide range of skills, and then specialize later down the line.
The final question is, what advice would you give to current students or recent graduates who are struggling to break into the games industry in particular?
The unfortunate bit of advice right now is just keep trying. The industry is in a bit of a weird spot at the moment. A lot of layoffs, and then those layoffs mean that lower end roles are getting taken up by people who would usually go for much higher roles, but because they've been laid off, they kind of just need jobs, and it's had a trickle down that made it even harder for graduates to get into the industry. But it's slowly going to improve. It's going to get better, and there are still opportunities out there. The hardest part of it is continuing on through rejection. You're going to get a lot of, we found someone else jobs, and it's about still applying, still going and finding new places, not letting it dishearten you, and just sticking with it as long as you can. As long as you are avidly trying to get better, you're grabbing feedback when they'll give it, improving your portfolio, making games, keeping your skills up, eventually it will come. It just unfortunately can take time. So stick to it. Don't let anything dissuade you, just keep applying. You'll get one eventually.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you later.